Nintendo Switch Online is in a good spot right now. Since its launch in 2018, it has massively expanded its virtual console library. While I'm not crazy about the online play quality of some games, if we just isolate the retro content part, it's pretty solid. I never bought virtual console games on the Wii and Wii U, so NSO was actually my first opportunity to have access to some of Nintendo's retro games. When it launched, I beat the original Super Mario Bros., and I just recently 100%ed Super Mario 64, which was also my first playthrough of the game. It's been over a year since Game Boy games launched on the service, and with the Switch 2 supposedly coming out in the first quarter of next year, it may be worth discussing the future of what content we might see. Currently, we have 6 systems represented, and it's reasonable to think we could get one more to keep the momentum going for the next generation. Though, as more consoles get added, the more hardware intensive and expansive games get. So, where do they draw the line? I think it's pretty obvious we won't get Wii games and newer, as they're just too recent and generally much longer. This leaves us with the DS and the GameCube. And I'm gonna cut right to the chase, I think it's the DS. Now, I have nothing against the GameCube and would love to see many of the games come to the Switch. In fact, the GameCube was my first console. Games like Sunshine and Luigi's Mansion hold a very special place in my heart, and I'm sure others feel the same, which is exactly why I don't think we'll get an NSO collection of them. Because they're so beloved, I think Nintendo is too smart to give us an entire collection of some of their most memorable titles. We've seen how they've treated Thousand Year Door, making it a finisher in a direct. It would greatly surprise me if that was the last of its kind as a fully fledged GameCube remaster. Just imagine the type of reaction a game like Sunshine or Path of Radiance would get with the same treatment. Even standalone releases in the same vein as Pikmin 1 and 2 would be still very well received for these types of games. While NSO does have its moments, the effect is just not the same as a remake. Not only that, but even if they wanted to give it to us, I'm not entirely sure they could. Completely looking past emulation barriers, the average file size of a GameCube game is much higher than an N64 or Game Boy Advance game. F-Zero GX alone is nearly as big as the entirety of the N64 Online app. An app consisting of 5 major GameCube titles would be around 2 or 3 gigabytes. If we double the amount of games, we're looking at a 10-game collection of around 6 or 7 gigabytes. I don't really think they would do this, especially considering how low internal storage is for Nintendo systems. They could take a cloud-based approach, but Nintendo really hasn't tapped into that yet. They tend to work around the hardware and storage limitations and make compromises when necessary, like with frame rate and resolution. Also, seeing the reception that the Kingdom Hearts collections got, I don't know if that's the route they would take. Overall, this option discourages portable play, which is kind of the main selling point of the Switch. Another idea could be that you can pick and choose which games you want to download from the app, similar to something like Xbox Games Pass. This would make it so you can play the games you want without using up the extra storage. It honestly wouldn't surprise me too much if they did eventually do this for NSO, or maybe a subscription for Switch 1 games, but at the same time, there's just way too much opportunity to just sell these games individually. Now, why do I think DS games are more likely? It's not like anyone's demanding to play these games that often anyway, and I think that's exactly why they'll do it. Nintendo has more to gain in releasing a DS collection than a GameCube one. Even for remakes, they've had to bundle a DS game with a Wii game like they did for Another Code. That type of treatment may work for a niche IP as a reintroduction, but nobody is rallying in the streets to play the original New Super Mario Bros. On the Switch. Releasing a collection of DS games lets them add more content to NSO that wouldn't be sold to players otherwise. There honestly aren't that many games I can think of on the DS that Nintendo would be rushing to remake anyway. Though me personally, I think not releasing a Nintendogs game on the Switch was an extremely missed opportunity. Maybe with the Switch 2 hardware, they can make one with hyper-realistic looking animals. Going back to file sizes, Nintendo can definitely pump out a library of DS games without taking too much space. 5 standard DS games combined still doesn't break 100 megabytes, which is much more comparable to N64 games. On top of this, we've already seen Nintendo dip their toe in DS Virtual Console with the Wii U, where they released 30 titles. Using numbers from ROM sites, a collection with Wii U's DS games would still nearly be about a gigabyte, whereas a collection of GameCube games with the same number would amount to nearly 18 gigabytes of space. For the Wii U, DS emulation felt like a good fit due to the dual screen gimmick on the gamepad, but how can that work with only one screen at your disposal? Now this is going to require a lot of creative thinking, so bear with me for just a minute. It could be as simple as both screens being displayed side by side on the TV, with the right stick controlling the pointer on the bottom screen, and one of the trigger or shoulder buttons being used to tap. But for the heck of it, let's think of some other ideas. One option is incorporating Bluetooth in the Switch 2's dock. Similar to how the Wii U streamed video to the gamepad, the Switch 2 could stream video to the dock. The bottom screen is displayed in the user's hands on the tablet, and the top screen is displayed on the TV using Bluetooth from the dock. Now, this concept completely relies on a feature that will probably not be on the Switch 2, but it would open the door to getting more 3DS and Wii U games that require a second screen in the future. Now, I have one more concept, but I'm going to need you to have an open mind for this one. Like how other NSO systems have had their respective controllers available for purchase, we could see something similar for the DS. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the worst or the best thing you've ever seen. A Joy-Con grip with a center compartment for the Switch to be inserted vertically. This allows a more faithful way to play DS games, with two screens to be displayed on top of each other, with touchscreen access and buttons on the side. The biggest downside to this is that it'd be locked to handheld mode, but you could still play on TV mode with the other ways I mentioned earlier. So, when will we see a DS service launch? Game Boy and GBA games launched around this time last year, with games still being rolled out even up to this year. Since 2021, we've seen 32 games get rolled out for N64 Online, with the most recent being in February. That being said, we're still missing some notable titles like Donkey Kong and Smash 64. I'm assuming that this year we'll see Nintendo roll out the last N64 games and continue with GBA games while the Switch comes to a close. Then, when the Switch 2 launches early next year, they'll focus on new games for a chunk of the year to reel people into the new generation. So DS on NSO will probably sit out for a while. My prediction is that they'll drop it in the September Direct next year. This gives Switch 2 games the breathing room they need while also prepping to give new owners content on the online service when the holiday season rolls around. Now, are we going to have to pay for another tier to have access? It's kind of hard to say since we don't have too big of a precedent for this. We can make the best guess by clearing some other things up first. First of all, will NSO even carry over to the next system? I know we call it the Switch 2, and the rumors only suggest that it's another Switch-like console, but we don't really know for sure. Honestly, I can't imagine them not doing another Switch, just because it worked so well for them. Not only that, but I think it will continue using some sort of Switch branding, whether it be Switch 2 or Super Switch or whatever. Also, it's important to note that they took 6 years to build NSO to what it is now, so I can't imagine they'll just knock it down and start over. Second question, will DS games be locked to Switch 2? Yes, as one of the incentives to get people to upgrade. Not only that, but this will ensure the smoothest emulation quality. I've read online that DS emulation works well on Switch through Homebrew, but each game has its own technical demands, so it's probably safest to limit it to stronger hardware. So, will it require a new tier? The optimist in me says no, but the realist in me says maybe? When Game Boy and Game Boy Advance went live, Game Boy was still added to the base tier, so it's not impossible that they could keep adding on to an existing tier. At the very minimum, I expect a price increase for both tiers, as that's just what's happening to games right now. It'd probably be around $5 to $10 extra for both tiers, which wouldn't be terrible, but nobody, including myself, likes to pay for something we already had for less. It could be possible in 2025 we just see another tier being added where they just slap the word Super on NSO and add DS, another Sega system, and more benefits, and just lock that tier for the Switch 2. There's a number of ways they could handle this, but for now, I'm just gonna say we're gonna have to pay more regardless. I'm glad Nintendo decided to abandon their original idea of having games cycle each month and opted for having their entire retro history available to play through NSO. Every time more content is added, we can take another step back and admire just how remarkable their catalog is. In 6 years, they've been able to add 244 games, 289 if you count Sega's contributions. At this rate, we're probably going to hit 300 games within the next few years. It's exciting to have access to these and be able to play them whenever I want, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how Nintendo improves their online service in the future.